Ladies and gentlemen, Life with Aaron with you, and it is my distinct honor and pleasure to talk to you today about the national battlefield in Vicksburg, Mississippi. Vicksburg, a specific goal of the Union Army to cut the Confederacy in two and stop the supply lines along the Mississippi River, hopefully shortening the war. But taking Vicksburg would be no easy task. 5 frontal assaults would fail, and the Union Army would have to employ very daring tactics in order to win the day. The Vicksburg Campaign had been so costly and so ineffective that even William Tecumseh Sherman had told Grant in a letter he did not see any means of success. Now we're going to make our way further into the park, and I can honestly say for anybody that has an affinity for the Civil War, war in general, even seeing the toll that war takes on a townspeople, this was a wonderfully laid out park, and you will enjoy it. And we find ourselves in the Vicksburg National Park Visitors Center. Of course, if you have a park pass, you can get into all these parks. We see portraits of General Pemberton and Ulysses S. Grant. Pemberton would resign in disgrace, and Ulysses S. Grant, of course, would go on to win the war and eventually the presidency. We now see an example of cannons that were used. This was the type of siege warfare that was going on. The Confederates were heavily entrenched, which made the city of Vicksburg really impenetrable. Only through the daring tactics of Grant actually deciding to come in behind the city were they finally able to take it. What would be known as the Vicksburg Campaign would last from the end of December of 1862 into July of 1863, culminating in the defeat of the Confederates on July the 4th, 1863. The Union side had nearly 80,000 men going against a combined force of 40,000 Confederates. By the end of the siege, the Confederate numbers had dwindled down to some 18,000 fighting men. In all, 29,000 troops would surrender. Another cool treat that was going on at the National Park, because it was Memorial Day weekend, we had some park reenactors actually shooting firearms to the period and also firing the cannon at various times, and they were dressed in period wear. It was very cool. Artillery played a major part in the siege of Vicksburg on both sides. For the Union artillery, they had to be a nuisance to the town and to the troopers, firing at all times. And that's not to mention the gunboats firing from the Mississippi River itself. On the Confederate side, they had 172 cannon. On the Union side, 220. The Confederacy would use theirs to repel incoming assaults by the Union regiments, as well as keep furthering Union supplied troops from getting to the city limits. It is important to note that the 172 cannon of the Confederacy would not only be confiscated by the Union upon their victory, but it would be taken out of the hands of the Confederacy. Arms were hard to come by, and these cannons would prove costly to lose. In 1863, a New York Times newspaper actually did a comprehensive report on the siege of Vicksburg. And it was estimated of the 220 Union cannon, each one fired more than 650 times. At times, the city residents said the incoming cannon fire was nonstop, day in and day out. This 1862 howitzer is the only one that we can definitively say took part in the Battle of Vicksburg. It was used by the Illinois Infantry and is on display at the park. The first stop on our battlefield tour is the Memorial Arch. It takes us back to the summer of 1863 and memorializes those who defended the city of Vicksburg. In total, from December to July the 4th, the Confederacy would lose about 9,100 troops killed in action. And on the Union side, a little over 10,000 men would die. Vicksburg would also see the inclusion of African American troops when General John Pemberton of the Confederacy decided to take the fight to the Union soldiers. They were repulsed by the African American soldiers, and their bravery so moved the Union command that 200,000 African American troops would be mustered into the Union Army. In all, 31 states are represented by monuments at the Vicksburg National Battlefield, memorializing the sacrifice of their citizens over the Vicksburg Campaign. This impressive structure to the right of the camera is the Illinois Memorial. Illinois sent the most troops to this battle, and every one is represented inside of this grand structure. Come with us now as we go inside. As you can see here atop this high ground, the task of taking Vicksburg in a frontal assault was all but impossible. Just imagine yourself back in 1863, the sound of cannon fire, the sound of muskets, deafening, the cries of the wounded and dead. It was truly a time to reflect on the sacrifices paid here so many years ago. There is only one building that still stands from 1863 on the battlefield, and that is where we go now, the Shirley home. This home to James and Adeline and their young son Quincy would also be known as the White House to soldiers on the battlefield. The Shirleys, although Union sympathizers, in fact owned 25 slaves. They would find themselves in the crossfire of a major battle, a place you do not want your home to be. But during the Civil War, many people found themselves in similar situation. The Shirley home itself was actually supposed to be destroyed. As the Confederate rear guard pulled back and entrenched, the order was given to destroy all buildings in front of the Confederate lines. The outbuildings and stables were quickly burned, but the soldier whose job it fell to destroy the main house was killed before he could carry out his orders. For 3 days, Adeline Shirley, her son Quincy, and servants held out, huddled together in a chimney corner. Finally, at the end of the 3 days, Adeline would descend the stairs, and the window vantage point you see right here, she would place a white sheet showing there was distress. Finally, Union soldiers would help the family and servants into the caves below and to safety. The area around the Shirley home would be important as well, as Union soldiers would actually tunnel underneath the Confederate lines. We're going to go through such a tunnel now. The Union Army, weary of continuing losses from frontal assaults, would use any idea at their disposal, including digging trenches, tunnels, and even placing mines underneath Confederate battlements. The following monument is to honor the vital role that the Navy played in the Siege of Vicksburg. In a future video, we'll get into more specifics of the important role that they played. After more than 40 days of siege, with the town starving, with an army decimated, General John Pemberton made the most difficult decision of his military career: to surrender the city. I leave you now with monuments to those who fought and died on this hallowed ground. Thank you for watching, and please stay tuned for more.
In the Colgren, wherefore many more have gone. When they come, I will stand my ground. Stand my ground. I'll never be afraid. Thoughts of him take away my fear. Sweat and blood hide my veil of tears. Once a year, say a prayer for me. Close your eyes and remember me. Ne'er more shall I see the sun, for I fell to a German's gun. Lay me down in the Colgren, wherefore many more have gone.